Towers before sunrise, truth after noon. My name is Alex, and I keep the city audible when it forgets how to listen. I'm a broadcast transmitter engineer, one of the people who climb out of range to put everyone back in range. On paper, my job is forward power, reflected power, combiner losses, dehydrators, masks, masks, masks. In practice, it's weather and patience and a ladder that does not care who you are. I carry a multimeter that remembers every indignity I've put it through, a torque wrench that feels like virtue, and a notebook whose corners taste like winter. I keep a spare pair of socks sealed in a Ziploc, because confidence is warmer when your feet are. I live with Theo. He bends neon for signs and for the long conversations people have with light. He comes home smelling like hot glass and ambition, with chalk lines on his jeans and cartoons burned into his eyelids. He keeps a notebook of letters that went wrong and why they deserved to. Our apartment looks across the river at the ridge where my towers live, red beacons pulsing like a measured apology. On the fridge, we keep a magnetized notepad titled Say in Daylight, because we promised not to invent truths after midnight. Some mornings, the magnet is the only thing in the kitchen that doesn't lie. The Tuesday when the meters were fine and I was not, I was at Kettleback Ridge beside the combiner building, listening to the transmitters breathe. There was frost inside the fence and a hawk on the corner of the shelter roof pretending to be administrative. I had just zeroed the directional coupler on a backup FM written forward reflected OK, and was pulling out my phone to log the service call when the lock screen bloomed with a notification from the joint email Theo and I use for deliveries. Thank you for your stay, Summit Hotel. Time, 12-093-01. Points, 200 added. I didn't call. Our rule for anything that isn't yet a disaster is 2 loops around the block before nomming it. My block was 200 yards of frozen gravel from the shelter to the edge of the access road and back. I walked it twice, my breath practicing for something it didn't want to say. The guy wires hummed the only sentence wires know. You already know. Theo came home with tiny flecks of glass in his hair like stars with better union representation. He set a bundle of paper patterns on the counter, kissed the air, then my cheek, then the burn on my forearm from a waveguide I met incorrectly. The third kiss is always the calibrated one with him, and saw the notepad turn to blank. I held out my phone like a glass of water I wasn't sure he wanted. He didn't audition confusion. Yes, he said, resting his palm on the back of a chair the way builders test honesty. Cold shop was jammed. The client moved the viewing earlier. The gallery manager suggested a daytime room at the summit. He looked up. I went, with Elijah. Elijah photographs neon the way cartographers map rivers, for where the light went as much as where the glass is. Theo admires him loudly and often. We worked, he said. It felt good to be possible under a ceiling I didn't hang. There are currents you respect because they're not yours. We need a clear table, I said. Tonight, no phones, no glass cutters disguised as metaphors. I have this habit. I turn fear into furniture. I dragged the task lamp from my desk to the small maple table by the window, laid a square of plexiglass over it, slid a short string of battery lights underneath that refused to take sides, and taped a clean sheet of paper on top. In black marker I wrote, "Clear table, one truth, one want, no asterisks." Theo set both palms down. My truth, he said, voice hot and cooling, is I liked being looked at like I was still becoming. My truth, I said, choosing verbs the way I choose torque, no over-tightening, no under, is I'm not afraid you slept with him. I'm afraid you'll write the final label somewhere I can't read it. My want, To want you now, not the museum version of later. My truth, he said, is I want to be seen when I'm still glass and guesswork, not just when the transformer sings. My want, that you want me halfway, fingerprints and all. We added a rule to the fridge. 1 hour without screens each night and a post-it on the table before we brushed our teeth. The first week looked like a row of small, earnest sentences. Kiss me without captions. Say no without a proposal. Hotel emails stop at the door. And then, like a polite ghost, the hotel wrote again. Double points all month. Marketing is a metronome that refuses to hear a song. I hid in work. I replaced a dehydrator filter and scolded a Coke's connection that had forgotten manners. I swept the antenna system with the network analyzer and watched the return loss curve behave like a modest mountain range. I reset a transmitter that believes it has opinions about sunrise. Between tasks, I wrote on a scrap, "Remember water, not the kind that freezes on the guy anchors, the kind you drink when grief makes your mouth loud." That night Theo wrote on the table, "I want to be able to tell you when I like something that isn't you." I wrote, "I want to offer more than reprimands. Smaller, more than apologies." Days pretended to be cooperative. A line worker sent me a photo of a raccoon sitting on a ground strap like it was a bench at a park it had paid taxes for. A kid at the gas station asked if towers are trees we forgot to water. An old man in a blaze orange hat told me he could still hear AM stations in his fillings. I bought coffee with the quiet shame of someone who knows a transmitter that won't boot and a conversation that will. When I got home, Theo was tapping gray paper to a wall like he was installing better weather. "Sunday," he said, "let's take the early train to the coast. Arbitrary day, late return." "Yes," I said, like someone grateful for a scheduled outage. We went, 2 hours of noise that belonged to no one. On the beach I thought restricted visibility, laughed at myself, and let my instruments be wrong. We ate a sandwich that believed too much in salt and then another that had learned mercy. Back home, he wrote, "I want to be there when you congratulate yourself." I wrote, "I want to congratulate you without checking the forward power first." It felt like both a joke and a maintenance note. The magazine that hires him offered a 3-day micro-residency in a concrete studio that pretended to be warm. Hotel included. "I want to go for the work, not the soap," he said. "I also want to prove I know how to come back." Protocol. Nightly voice memo. Morning, I'm here. No poetry. He left with a reasonable backpack, a shirt I forgive the world for, and a single-serve citrus soap whose typeface was friendlier than it meant. I lived like a network after a storm, orderly, alert, one bad idea away from a fault. The second night I drove up the ridge at midnight because a front was shouldering through, and the transmitters like to be reassured by someone who can count to 5. The wind tried to explain itself. The shelter door fought me like a sibling. Inside, the red LEDs suggested a stable argument. Outside, the tower lights blinked a language planes respect. I leaned my forehead against the rack frame and listened to the fan noise until it was less about me. Voice memo 1. The room doesn't smell like anything, it's almost sad. Voice memo 2. I'm here, and a blurry picture of a white wall that breathed better than we had. Voice memo 3 didn't come for hours. I rearranged our apartment like I was hunting a frequency. Jealousy has the mechanics of a stuck latch. Then the text, I'm making my no. I told them I have someone. I said I'm not interested in being profitable for anything else. He came back. He put the melon-scented soap on the console. Drawer for things we laugh about without getting hurt, I asked. Drawer, he said. On the table he wrote, let's learn something useless together. We tried whistling in 2 parts. Catastrophe first, then a narrow miracle, 30 seconds of overlap without envy. 2 sine waves agreeing to share a small piece of time. I don't want to be heroic, I want to be exact. Some evenings I open the archived hotel email the way you tongue a repaired tooth. Some mornings Theo comes home with a light I don't recognize. I can see the day tuned his frequencies. Sometimes the table looks like a bric-a-brac held together by tape, sometimes a music stand waiting for breath. We sit, we talk low, we let our hands do nothing. Yesterday, a developer in a suit the color of damp concrete suggested lowering radiated power, a touch to save money, as if physics kept a coupon drawer. He said value like it was a synonym for smaller. I looked at the ridge and decided there are hours when you get to be the shore. No, I said, polite as a warning sign. On the train back, I watched a couple argue by texting. Their faces stayed careful while their thumbs shouted. On our block, an old man asked if the tower was safe. Better today than yesterday, I said. I'll keep it that way. He nodded like I'd handed him a handrail. On my way home, I texted Theo. I don't want all your notes so I can own them. I want to know them so I can recognize them. He replied, then look. The right way to tell a man whose hands are a language that you're listening. I ducked into the hardware store that smells like competence and bought a strip of small blank tags. This morning the hotel tried again, last chance to double your points. I clicked change address and typed hours. I taped 3 tags along the bottom edge of the table and wrote in block letters, ME, US, today. Theo put his hand flat on the paper. One truth, one want, no asterisks, he said. My truth, I still want to be looked at like I'm a draft. My want, that you look at me like I'm always becoming. My truth, I said, is that I'm afraid of silence but less than yesterday. My want, to kiss you now, even if our hands smell like flux and electricity. He laughed, one bright note, and said, flux is not a perfume. I said, then lend me yours, and did the part that isn't about words. At noon, a lightning arrestor on the auxiliary line decided to dramatize a hairline crack. I drove up with the new one, the old one in a bucket like a lesson, and swapped them with more care than pride. A turkey vulture watched from the fence post as if to say even the sky needs a supervisor. In the shelter, I reset the transmitter, watched the forward power climb to where the math says hope lives, and felt the shrug the system makes when it decides to agree with you. When I came home, the notepad on the fridge had 2 new lines in Theo's handwriting. Say the hard thing before the hard thing says you. Keep the skyline where you can see it. The little lights under the plexi flickered once, as if approving. Outside, a freight eased along the river without making the pigeons change their plans. Somewhere in the substation down the block, a transformer hummed its old yes-no and meant both. The ridge lifted its red blinkers exactly on time. And the switches of the city, if you'll believe me, decided for one night only to line themselves without complaint.